Green buttons? This is a public forum, 5 minutes per item maximum. We would like to welcome the members of the public who have taken the time to attend this meeting and provide comments on matters related to district business. Any member of the public may address the board relating to any matter within the board's jurisdiction. This need not be related to any item on the agenda. However, the board cannot act on an item unless it was noticed on the agenda. Persons speaking during the public comment will be limited to 5 minutes, or depending upon the number of persons wishing to speak, it may be reduced to allow all members of the public the opportunity to address the board. We will move on to the consent calendar.
We'll ask if anybody wants to speak.
Does anybody in the public like to speak? Nope. Consent calendar.
Consent calendar. Item number 1, minutes of the special board meeting of May 23rd, 2019, and regular board meeting of May 28th, 2019. Item number 2, approval of reimbursement claims for director's statements of meetings attended and or travel expenses and the claim summary for May 2019.
Ask if anybody wants to pull it.
Anybody like to pull any items?
No. Okay. I'll make the motion to approve. If there's no public comment.
Is there any public comment? Okay, it's been regularly moved and seconded that we approve the consent calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Approval of reimbursement claims for director's statement of meetings attended
we
by.
approved that. We did
Pardon?
that. We're on
Regular business.
Regular business.
Yeah. So Lisa, we'll read that.
Lisa?
Regular business. Item number 3, consider contract award to Nugget and Sons, Inc. for the construction of the Monte Vista tank replacement project.
Good afternoon. The Monte Vista tank had a dive inspection last year and was found to be in a really bad shape. So our ops department elevated the project to get it constructed more quickly. So we put it out to bid, and we had a design consultant, Provo and Pritchard, did the design on the tank, and we put it out to bid on April 9th of 2019. This tank is very important to our system because it feeds water in 3 different directions, and it floats with 3 other tanks. And it's very critical for us to have this tank during the ditch outage. So the construction on this tank, if awarded, would be after the ditch outage. The tank has nearly 100% internal coatings failure, and it has severe corrosion on the dollar plate and the center support column, and it's pretty unsafe. So we're looking to replace it. We opened bids on May 31st of 2019. There's 2 bids. One was Nugget & Sons, the other was Sierra Mountain Construction. Nugget & Sons was the low bid with a total of $811,993.17. They were responsive and the lowest bidder. Any questions about the project?
Was our budget estimate the $713,000, or was that just what was in the budget for last year, and this one came in a little bit higher just because there's a lot more people out there busy?
Provo and Pritchard, their estimate came in at about $950,000, which we thought was pretty high. So we knocked it down to $713,000, which ended up being a little bit too low. We've been noticing just in general that a lot of our bids are coming in a lot higher than we normally do. I think it's just due to the construction season. What's happening right now, things are just getting more expensive, and the contractors are just more busy. We've been seeing about an increase of about 30%. So I don't know if that quite answered your question.
Okay.
We came up with that number.
Thank you. That's it.
Any other questions?
Why did we only get 2 bids?
I'm just going to add to the, you covered it.
Address that.
We only got 2 bids, obviously, and Ed was curious why we only got 2 bids, and I don't know exactly because we did widely advertise this, and we advertised to tank. One of the suspicions I have is we're transitioning to a different construction methodology than we had in the past. In the past, TUD crews would do all the site work and the underground work, and we would literally just solicit bids from tank manufacturers. Those are people that come in and all they do is put up a tank. So you're dealing with one contractor. Now we're having a contractor do all the site work, the grading, all the.
Yeah, there's a lot of underground on this job too. It's not just a tank, it's also replacing a lot of the distribution right around the tank. And so there's some valving and everything that needs to get taken care of too.
And with that, what you see are two contractors that aren't tank builders. So the prime contractor now is just a local guy, and they're subbing work to a tank manufacturer. So you're kind of building in some profit on two contractors now, and it's just that there's more work being done with the site work, and that's part of the reason. I think Jennifer was a little humble because I think she thought it was going to be more than 713, and so that's a little bit more on me. We knew that our consulting engineers cost was way high, and so we are closer to what we thought than what they thought it was going to be. So we hang our hat on that, but we were a little bit low, and like she said, bids are coming in really high right now.
Okay.
And I'd just like to add on to that too. We did 2 mandatory pre-bid meetings for this job, and we did have 9 contractors show up, but only 2 bids. So there was interest, and so I'm not really sure exactly why the other 7 didn't place a bid.
Ron?
So I may have missed it, but is this going to be a welded tank or a bolted
A
tank?
steel bolted tank,
Okay,
It's
thank
under
you.
discussion.
400,000 gallons.
Thank you.
And does this also have the exterior girders on the roof? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's different about this tank too. We haven't had a bolted steel tank with exterior roof rafters, and although they are a little more expensive by about $20,000 to $30,000, we feel like it will be better in the long run as far as corrosion control on the inside of the tank. And then this tank also has an external stairway going up, so instead of the ladder, it's a stairway. It's a little safer,
Okay.
but it adds to the cost.
Is there any comments or questions from the public? Okay, thank you. Anybody like
Call
to?
for a motion?
Yep.
Okay.
I move to approve the recommended action.
Did you say, I'll second? Okay.
Done regularly moved and seconded that we approve the recommended action. Any other comment?
We need it, yeah, so.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Next is project status update, Lakewood Dam repair project.
So our district engineer is getting his notes together. Director Barbara Balin and I were talking one day, and she thought it might be helpful to have an update on some of the various projects, especially larger projects. And so this is an update on a project that's been going on for some time, and our district engineer does have a status update, so we'll walk through it.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, Lakewood Dam, we'll kind of get into the history, the way this little presentation update's going to go. We'll give you a history and what transpired back in 2017 and where we're at right now with the project. We do have folks from Condor, Jeff Krovitz, the design engineers here, and Amy Augustine, who handled our environmental compliance, is also here to answer some questions. So it's kind of a tag team approach. It's going to go through a few slides. It's not a real long presentation, and then I'll hand it off to Jeff and Amy to finish up, and then any questions. You can interrupt anytime. So where is the project site? If you're unfamiliar, Sierra Pines is right here, and then just up Middle Camp onto Lakewood Drive. You can't really see it from the road very easily, but it is a small 5 to 7 acre foot pond, a lake, if you want to call it that, that the homeowners up there use for recreational purposes, but that the district has historically used during the ditch outage. And so what we have done is we put water, there's a, I should back up and say there's a treatment plant, the Lakewood treatment plant. Let me see if I can get this pointer to work. Let me see here. Here we go. So the Lakewood treatment plant, you can barely see. There's a little tank right there. there's a pipeline from that location over to this, and that pipeline is served in multiple directions. So we've put water in the lake and then taken it out during the ditch outage. We typically put a pump over there, and that's what satisfies our demands during that time. So the lake has had value to us, but in 2017, if you'll recall, there was some pretty significant storm damage throughout the county. I can't remember how many roads washed out. Our crews went up to this site and noticed that there was significant damage to the spillway.
Go. And this is right on Sullivan Creek.
It is.
Correct? So flow is released.
Correct.
Flow comes in and then the creek flow is released.
Right.
Thank you.
And I should say that the district has a 7 acre-foot listed storage right, but there is a bit of cloudiness as to really how the chain of title transferred. This used to be Little Springs Water Company, and then it transferred to the Lakewood Park Association, and TUD retained this storage right, yet the chain of title isn't very clear. Let's just leave it at that for now. So like I said, 5 to 7 acre foot impoundment, fed from Sullivan Creek. This is typical of Tuolumne County. We have a nice recreational asset to support the cabins or seasonal homes. In 1977, Little Springs Water Company disbanded, transferred actually to Tuolumne County Water District Number 2, our predecessor. This storage right, but also wrapped up like a nice little package with a bow on it was the obligation to maintain and replace the existing dam and valve structure therein. So
That had a bow on it?
yeah, a really nice little gift there. The land and the dam, we do know, are owned by the Lakewood Park Association. TUD now has operated for successive years without this resource. And how have we gotten through the ditch outage? Well, Don's crews have put in a temporary transfer pump station down Middle Camp Road, and we purchase water from Twain Harte Community Services District. They have adequate capacity, and it's worked out really well. We put it right alongside the road. There's a fenced enclosure around. We put a generator there, and it works fine.
How much does that cost?
So the purchase of water, I believe, Steve or Don, correct me, is maybe $13,000 or so last year. And I can't remember if we took 2 million gallons or how much we...
Just under.
Okay, so...
Help me, so we don't need this facility that we can pump out of. And because it's more convenient, there's obviously benefits, even though it costs the district that amount to buy the water.
Correct. A couple things. One, the water quality in the pond is suspect. Two, we're purchasing treated water from Twain Harte, not suspect. The ease of operations during the ditch outage, the reliability of this way versus the old way, it's uncomparable, right? It's much more efficient and easy to operate getting this water from Twain Harte than the old way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that a comparison should be made also, that if we can't have body contact in lions, how can we have contact there and use water?
Right.
Good point. So the last bullet on the slide really is we no longer have an interest. Now, I should say that the scenario that Don outlined, we envision is temporary. It works fine, but the long-term solution, which the board will get an update on, is our design of the new regional water treatment facility at Sierra Pines, which will include its own impoundment that will be much larger. I mean, we would like to get 50 acre feet there and be under Division of Safety of Dams, like maximize storage on Sierra Pines, and then we wouldn't need to purchase water from Twain Harte, and we wouldn't need this impoundment either. Just kind of moving forward, during February 9th, 2017, our crews discovered that the storm damage had damaged the spillway, and I'll show you a picture. It was to the point where, wow, February 9th, we've got a few months of heavy rain left potentially. We're hearing about other, I think Oroville was around this time. There was heightened sensitivity to dam failure, and we weren't comfortable, that is, staff wasn't comfortable trying to eke through the next couple months. We felt like there was an imminent failure, and we couldn't pump down the reservoir because the flow coming in was so high. So we had to wait till one storm passed. We drew the reservoir down, and our crews, you'll see, breached the dam in order to establish a natural drainage pattern that wasn't impounding any water and took away the risk of a dam failure. Before we did that, we did alert County Office of Emergency Services. We did notify property owners around the dam site. Just downstream is the Twain Harte Community Services District and their Shady Brook Reservoir. I don't know what the impacts would have been to them, but certainly there would have been a lot of sediment that would have washed down into their reservoir too, so that was a consideration. With permission of Lakewood Park Association, we went ahead and did this. Our crews worked very hard at night in order to get this done in between storm events. And then the important point here is Cal OES and FEMA have approved funding for the reconstruction repair. So there's what the damage looked like. It doesn't give you the full scale of it, but February 9th, you can imagine there was a lot more rain that fell this particular year. If that kept walking back, we could have seen a pretty dramatic failure, not just a gradual, but an actual full-fledged emptying of the reservoir.
So the photo on the right was taken from, on the photo on the left, there's a little path. See in the upper left? Were you standing at that point?
So yes, you're right, Barbara. We are taking photos from both sides of this. That's right, exactly. There's a lot more photos, but I thought this one captured the crest of the dam really is right here. So, and what you can't see in the shadows here is how far back in, recessed back in this was going. There really wasn't a lot of soil left impounding that water. So this is when we knew we had to take dramatic measures. We couldn't just fill this with riprap because the erosion was largely because of this design of this down drain, this CMP. When a log, you could see the log got caught in there, and it probably started to hold back some material. And then there was no energy dissipation at the bottom of this, and once it failed there and it started to fall down, I mean, it was really hard to stop this kind of damage.
Eric?
Yeah.
With the rebuild of the dam, are we putting the spillway back in the middle of the dam, or is it going on the end?
Jeff can address that, but we're putting the spillway, he's got a much better design, and it's in the same location.
Okay.
So this is the response. The first photo here is shortly after our crews had finished the work. You can see the damage here. They dug through to the very bottom of the reservoir and laid back the slopes. They jute netted all this, and they rip-wrapped this because we knew there was a lot of rain still left to come. And fortunately, it worked very well. All the flow it was just a pass-through. And so we didn't have any risks of failure there, but obviously the Lakewood Park Association was inconvenienced for a few years now. They haven't been able to utilize their reservoir. And then this is a more recent photo of kind of how it's healed and the opening there from very close to where the swimming platform is. I think at this point it might be a good time to have Jeff discuss, if you want the clicker.
Okay.
This advances the slides, and if you hold that down, that's the pointer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff Krovitz. I'm Principal Project Director with Condor. I feel like I'm the newest person on this project. the design team. I came to Condor in June a year ago from Calaveras County. I wanted to let you know it's been really great working with your staff. They're sharp, they're responsive, they do what they say when they say they're going to do it, and it's truly been a collaborative effort. So thank you for the opportunity and the confidence. In terms of the hydraulics and hydrology that Condor did, that was one of the first orders of business, was to figure out, well, what was the cause of failure. It was pretty obvious. The spillway outflow organized and jetted the overflow. And so it was like turning a fire hose on a soil dam. It was very steep. The canyon itself is very steep at the outflow. It started eating the soil away. It started collapsing around the spillway. Those are the photos that you saw. The other thing that you have to understand about the winter of 2017 is we had approximately 6 events between December of 2016 and March of 2017 that all exceeded the 70-year probabilistic model. So that meant that the chances of each of these finite events occurring in that particular year was 1 in 70. And we had 5 of them within the space of 4 months. So I think that's kind of the new regime we're going to be seeing as we move ahead. The storms are going to come less and less often. When they do come, they'll be a little angrier. More intensity, higher intensity flows. So we prepared the H&H analysis of the dam to determine what the new or best management protocol we could use for the new design would be. We decided that we were going to need to accommodate larger overflows, larger spillway flows. The greater flows were going to require stabilization of the spillway. But even more importantly, we had a very short distance between the crest of the dam, the beginning of the spillway, and the end of the actual property line to be able to take the energy out of these flows so that they weren't scouring the channel or the dam itself. So we had a very short physical window in which to take the energy out of this flow. The new spillway design, we think, will be more resilient, and it includes an energy dissipator. I'll show you a little bit about that in a minute. The old timber bridge across the spillway will be replaced by a prefabricated, pre-engineered metal bridge. We had environmental considerations that we were required to accommodate. We have a listed endangered species, the western pond turtle up there. We had to accommodate temporary impacts of the bypass. So we are bypassing water around the construction site of Sullivan Creek. We had to do environmental restoration of the areas that we disturbed, but the requirement to repair those disturbed areas using what we call bioengineered or biotechnical treatments was up there. We can't just put in a bunch of rock. We need planted, vegetated slopes, things like that. And then any trees that we pull out, and this is not including trees that die of bug kill, they are trees that we actually physically remove, we're required to replace those at a 3-to-1. So for every 1 tree we take out, we replace it with 3 trees. We maintain them for up to 5 years. Question?
Quick question. Would those species be for the riparian habitat or for what trees?
It's the replacement. So we take out a cedar tree, we replace it with 3 cedar trees. We take out a Doug fir, 3 Doug firs. White fir, 3 white firs.
Okay, gotcha.
Would nix the ladder.
This is a drawing from the construction documents, and what you can see, if I did this right. Oh, I love it.
So just a question on the tree replacement.
Yeah.
In many areas we have overstocked trees anyway. So if we're taking out 1, planting 3, are we exacerbating a condition, or is it actually make sense to plant 3-to-1?
This is Amy Augustine from Augustine Associates. She was working with us on the environmental portions of this in the permitting.
On the bright side, 1 is actually a sapling ponderosa pine that we were going to be putting some excavated soils near. We actually don't think we'll have to remove it. The other is a willow, and we're going to take willow branches.
And just stick them in the ground and let them root. Okay.
So it is riparian.
So it's not a big issue anyway. So
There wasn't much vegetation on that side to begin with.
But regardless, for us to be able to get our agreement, the 1600 stream alteration agreement with Fish and Wildlife Service, we had to show the number of trees that we were removing, live trees that we were removing. We had to show a replacement at a 3-to-1 ratio, regardless of whether we had an overpopulation of trees in this particular area. What I tried to do was to locate the replanted trees to shade some of the sunnier areas up above on the riparian banks. And I also tucked a few trees towards the bottom outside of the embankment slopes to help to stabilize outside of the dam itself. So that was the goal in terms of the location. We will have a project biologist on site during construction who knows more about this than I do, and he can redirect the planting of those trees to the best effect. Any more questions on this? Okay, so some of the things that are worth highlighting. This is Sullivan Creek right here. That's the little cofferdam. This is the pipeline for the bypass that discharges below the dam. You see here's the reconstructed portion of the dam right in there. We're putting in a new low water outlet structure, new pipe, new valves. We've got the spillway, some approach slabs on the water side of the dam to help stabilize it. Put in a little utility bridge so that we can bring vehicles and a small backhoe across that for maintenance. And then we have the turtle refuge area. Since we have the western pond turtles, we've got to provide them with a refuge during construction. This was a logical area because it was as far away from the construction as we could get within the dam. It's also fed by seasonal drainage that crosses under this access road and feeds this pond. We had a tree down that was already partially submerged when the water level was high, and that's part of the environmental enhancements that the pond turtle likes. They're called basking logs. They're logs they can climb up on the log and get the suntan oil on. And then we're adding an extra log here, putting in a temporary berm that will be taken out after the dam is completed and it starts watering back up again. So the timing on that's going to be critical. We had to predict how long it was going to take to refill the dam, so we made that up. And looking forward to this. Any questions on the kind of the environmental side of, and Amy will give you more details on this in a minute. Okay, next slide. All you.
Oh, goody. No, we're good. So basically, there's the basking area that we were talking about, and we will be putting up what the engineering team has been referring to as a turtle spa. It is actually made up of, there were 13 out there the first day we went out. Most of them were red-eared sliders. In other words, everybody who lived around the subdivision took their pet turtle, not a native, and stuck it in that pond. So there's slightly more than half of the turtles out there are actually not even native. They look just like the natives, but they have a big red streak. And during this project, when the actual construction is going to be taking place over here, they'll just put a berm here, keep this here, add one more basking area, and they will hang out there. There will be a biologist on site so that if they get out of that area, we'll just pick them up, move them, stick them back over in the turtle spa area. That was really the only, that was the primary issue environmentally. Otherwise, it was just a matter of diverting water on Sullivan Creek so that it goes below the dam while they're working on the dam. Otherwise, there really wasn't much environmentally. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had any.
Just a quick clarification on Sullivan Creek, sorry, real quick, because when you talk about bypassing Sullivan Creek, we have observed Sullivan Creek, maybe not this year, but in the past, it's a trickle. So it's not like we're taking a major flowing stream and diverting it around the work site. It's literally like 10 gallons a minute kind of thing. This year, with construction occurring late in the year, we're hoping that we'll drop down to that level of flow. If we went out there now, that would be tough.
I think Terry measured it around 5 gallons a minute at about the time we would be doing it. And there's not much in the way of fisheries in there either. So, you know, really it's the turtle spa, and they'll be having plenty of water to support them.
When you go to where Woods Creek actually does come into Don Pedro, and let's say I know from when Mormon Creek goes into Maloney's, those basking areas, because the creek is real, hits a baseline or, false baseline, and there are a lot of basking areas in those two environments. And the pond turtles are huge, really good size.
Wow.
And, the miners in Chinese camp would make turtle soup out of them, coming from Sullivan, coming from Woods Creek and Sullivan Creek into the Don Pedro. So this is, been documented as traditional migratory habitat for the pond turtles. My question to you is, when did you do this survey? Like what month? And we'll start with that question, then I have another question after that.
We did one spring, we did one summer, and we did one fall.
Okay. Now, do they burrow down? Because I know on the ditches they will burrow down into the mud.
Yes. But we'll be starting this before they've estivated. So we'll be starting this while they're still active so that they won't be burrowed into the mud.
Okay.
And even if one happens to want to crawl in early or it gets a little cool early, we'll have somebody there to grab them and move them out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually pretty surprisingly easy to catch. They like to urinate all over you when you catch them. So that's a fun part of turtle.
Yeah. Well, they're mind blowing when you see them, and I don't want to describe what they look like in the bud. When you're walking along the ditch, and you see this little lump. It's really wonderful that
But
they
their
can
noses
still get
will
around.
usually stick up, so you can usually find them. And they naturally are occurring. That's where they like to hang out. They prefer that part of the pond.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Do the natives mix with the non-natives?
They're not supposed to. The non-natives are supposed to keep the populations down of the natives. So I was surprised. In fact, we looked at them very, very carefully, thinking, "Oh, these are all just non-natives." No, they've mixed. I don't know why that is. Maybe the pond turtles that were already there were large enough that they weren't
Threatened.
in trouble with the pets that got tossed in there.
Eric, are you leaving the bypass pipe in there when you're done, or does that get cut off, or what?
Literally, as Amy said, 5 gallons a minute is what we anticipated. So our bypass system literally is like a drum with holes poked in it with some filter fabric around it on a little sandbag impoundment with a sump pump, very similar to what you would have in your basement.
Oh, okay, because the dash line looked like it was a pipe, but it's not.
It will be a pipe. It will be a poly pipe that lays on top of the ground just during construction.
Oh, okay, got it.
We've even been known to just use a fire hose from time to time.
That'll work too.
Just curiosity, the people that dump their pet turtles out there, is that a permanent deal, or are they grazing them out there, or what?
No, they get tired of them, so they dump them. They
They
don't
just
want
leave them out there permanently, just get
Oh,
tired
yeah.
of them?
No.
They're just growing
It only
until the
takes
next
a
turtle soup, deal, or what? Yeah, okay.
You'll,
Not red paint.
you'll notice
No more turtle food.
Columbia College, there's a huge population of them also. In fact,
Any big goldfish out there too, with it? Yeah.
now that you mention it,
Belgian kingfishers would nail
No.
those in a
I'm
heartbeat.
surprised. Yeah, we could have a koi pond, but
Yeah.
no, I have not.
Nobody's pet
No,
goldfish
that
made it out
wouldn't
there,
work.
okay.
So just a couple other things. We've covered the spa, we've covered the habitat enhancement for the turtles, and the vegetation around the enhancement. There's some other environmental things that we've done on the borrow side. There's going to be a little bit of a cut bank, so I've stabled that with something called VRSS, which is vegetated reinforced stabilized soil. It's like burrito wraps with willow planting in between the lift layers. So we have kind of a vertical bank, which will be nice for the kids to jump in, but it will have willows on it, and it'll be stable on the north side, Eric, am I direction right? And then also we've got stabilization at the outlet of the spillway. It's flowing through a rock dissipation structure, then it's going over a waterfall, which is a series of gabions, and those are rocks in a cage. So we call it a rock zoo. And then down at the bottom of the rock zoo, we have another a rock stabilization energy dissipator, and we've done a little bit of planting around the sides of it with some of the harvested sedges that we've pre-harvested from the construction site. Any more questions on that? Good. The environmental permit we're getting is a stream alteration agreement We got notification of the complete application on the 29th of May, and the service then has 60 days to provide us with the agreement. If they don't, it's deemed complete, and we can go to work.
Okay. I had one other question for Eric. When it says TUD is no longer an interest in the reservoir, how are we transferring that, from a legal standpoint, or are we, or what are we doing,
It's a good question. I think it's the subject of a future board meeting, and I'm not prepared, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Ed about it, but it is front and center. Your question is right on. After this project gets done, the Lakewood Park Association has an interest to utilize their asset and have water in it, and we don't really necessarily have a use for it, but maybe there's an emergency agreement, some sort of arrangement there, but we're just trying to get through the construction so that we can double back on that.
Okay, so there'll be some sort of acceptance, and we'll work out some deal structure, and you'll bring it back. Okay.
Right.
Barb?
Yeah, I have a different opinion on that because of where we want to go in the future. And so my opinion is every single impoundment that we have an entitlement to is important. And I'm kind of leery of just letting it go. And I think every single partnership that we have, even if it's a white glove recreational partnership, is important because it positions us in other leagues, if you will, and other players. And it's all kind of stair-stepping our ability to really help the community demonstrate value, partnerships, also with Fish and Game, and enhancements for multiple benefits. And all that, I believe, serves the district really well as we move into more complicated times where we actually need partnerships and we need these kinds of impoundments. So I see the value in partnering rather than releasing it.
That's consistent with what you've been saying, so I hear you loud and clear, and I think that's why it deserves a more discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll finish this up. Construction and mitigation and monitoring that we have planned for the project. The Sullivan Creek bypass will be installed and it will be removed. Disturbed areas will receive native erosion control seeding. The western pond turtle will install and remove the temporary refuge. That's the berm. So the berm will go in to hold the water temporarily during construction. It'll come out as we're filling the dam back up again. And then we have permanent environmental enhancements for the area that they seem to turtle flock to. Is that politically correct? And then in terms of revegetation, we've got the installation of the replacement trees, installation of willow planting in a lot of areas. We have a requirement to maintain the new trees. We have a requirement to maintain the willows, which won't be a problem. They grow like weeds. And there is a 5-year ongoing monitoring and maintenance requirement for the replanting on the trees, the re-veg. Construction, we have a tentative schedule right now. Advertisement went out June 5th. Thank you very much, Gadiel. Mandatory pre-bid is on the 20th. Bids are due on the 11th. I'll bring it to the board. Garrick will bring it to the board on the 23rd. Expecting construction to go major portions of construction from the third week of July to about the beginning of October. I'm expecting substantial completion on the 14th. That is the day before we move into winter erosion sediment control work. So I'd like everything in place before we cross that date line, because then the requirements change. And then final completion by the 1st of December. The type of work that may occur in that month and a half window from the middle of October to the beginning of December might be things like finishing off the bridge, removing the bypass. There will be non-substantial, non-impactful construction, cleanup, closeout, demobilization. Okay? And I think that does it. Questions?
Questions of the board?
I have a comment. This is FEMA money, correct?
Yes.
Right, so this isn't a leveraged loan or, you know, ratepayer money. This is actually FEMA response and all the permits and everything. And I just think that needs to be registered here because this really benefits our community, and all the surveys benefit our community and the habitat and the bridge and the structural upgrades and the redesign of the spill. So thank you very much.
Yeah, not wanting to put too fine of a point on it, but the funding on this is likely 75% funded by FEMA, 25% matched by Cal OES. So there are state disaster funds that are also doing this. Most public entities would have their own match. For some reason, this project doesn't, so good for you.
Thanks, Jeff.
You know, I should have mentioned that Marianne Chambers is in the audience. If you don't know her, she's representing the Lakewood Park Association, and she's been very patient, very tolerant, yet just the right level of involvement in checking in and making sure this is moving forward. So she's been very easy to work with, and we appreciate that. So I don't know if she has anything she wants to add.
I'm Marion Chambers. I'm the Lakewood Park Association president for about 10 years, and I'm very happy I have a background in biology and understand the permitting process.
Those were your turtles?
Grazers.
Actually, people used to raise frogs down there for the frog jump. We had some amazing frogs down there. Little background on the dam. The permit was originally pulled by Little Springs, actually Bonhauser and Associates, in 1959. So obviously a lot has changed since the building of that dam in 1959 till now. And we definitely appreciate all the work that's been done by TUD. And we're very thankful that our forefathers had a great agreement in 1977 when they actually disbanded and sold off the water rights and everything that went with it. So thank you very much. Thank you for the consideration. And we would still like to continue partnering with TUD in any way we can. And we'll kind of help along with the construction, whatever is needed. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public have any comments or questions?
No, but I'd like to echo what Director Balin mentioned about the value this is providing to the community. And I think this is a good opportunity to issue a press release about Lakewood Park and the value it's providing to them, the county, and disseminate to all of our communication outlets.
Yeah. Good idea.
And as we look to further impoundments and, you know, how we best operate the ditch and other things with that, you know, it's a good thing to look at of how do we partner and how do future responsibilities work and things like that. So
Get a dry hydrant on that, and fire protection.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
So that was just review only. So,
Okay.
Information.
So good review.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next is update on special districts participation in LAFCO.
Okay. I got some sheets to hand out. I got 6 copies, so I'll pass 2 down that way and 4 down that way. And if anybody wants another one, they can. We'll run some more copies.
Here, I'll share here.
Let's share. Oh, you.
So.
Got an extra?
Tomas?
Okay, so
We're good.
All right, I did one more. All right, so with the LAFCO, I was at a special district committee meeting on May 29th to look at issues related to having a seat at the table. You may remember when we had this presentation by the person from the one fire district. It was talked about, you know, that the special districts should look at seriously considering having a seat at the table, and the way to do that is to write a letter stating that there was some interest in that, and that the city paid 8% of the overall LAFCO deal, and that might be an option where TUD could pay 8% and go forward with that. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody can jump in here, but I kind of went away with that meeting of going, okay, you know, we can send this letter, we'll see how it works out, and then we'll make a decision from there. So we sent the letter in, and as did the other special districts, and it went in front of the LAFCO committee. So then they said, okay, now you can all get together as a group and decide how you want this to work. And when they were having the LAFCO meeting, the county indicated that, the city paid 8% because the county and the city sort of broke that allocation up based upon their population base, and the county having 92% of the population, the city having 8%, so that's how they allocated that. However, if the special districts wanted in with the seat at the table, they comprised a lot more of the county. They were spread out throughout the county, and the county was not willing to take on the additional cost and work to have everybody in. If the special districts wanted in, then they should step up to their third that's required by state law of do that. And the county was not interested in looking at doing an 8% allocation. So I went to the meeting. Then you guys, or Bob designated me as your LAFCO representative to at least represent this board, going to the meeting to see what the additional information was. I went to this meeting thinking that, okay, we have an option of whether or not we want to be in or out of this deal, and we'll see how it shakes out. If you also remember at the meeting we had, I think our board authorized up to an allocation of about $6,500 for the position to be on the LAFCO board if we got a seat at the table with one of the board seats, because it would increase the board allocation from 5 seats to 7. So I went to the meeting. Tom Trott and Pete Campa. Tom is obviously with Twain Harte, and Pete Campa with Groveland Community Service District. They're the largest group. So the way LAFCO sets up is that if the special districts got a third of the cost of the LAFCO allocation, then the rest of the breakdown by state law, unless there was some other agreement with the sub-parties of the special districts, then everybody paid a prorated share of that 1/3 based upon their total revenues as comprised to everybody else. So when I met with Pete and Tom, Pete had done a quick allocation of what that would sort of shake out at, and if we were about a third, that was coming out with TUD paying closer to around $9,000. And typically then the board members of those 2 seats would be a general election. Everybody would put their name in the hat, and the other special districts would vote for it. So you may remember that the special districts that we're comprised of is obviously the water companies. It's also Jamestown Sanitary. It's all the fire districts, and it's the library, or it's the cemetery districts. So there's about 17 entities that are involved in that LAFCO group. So when I went to the board, or when I met with Pete and Tom, I was talking about kind of where we were and what our board had decided, and that, I outlined that we thought, about a $6,500 amount was our allocation, and we wanted a permanent seat on that board. And they indicated that, well, since we've all sent in this letter and it's been accepted by the county, as long as the group, as a vote of 50%, decides to go forward with this LAFCO deal, you're automatically opted in. There's no opting out of that. So I was not aware of that when we voted on it at the board. So I either missed that or it wasn't made apparent. So with us sending that letter in, and basically the rest of the group saying they wanted to be in, as long as the group agrees to their 1/3 allocation, we're in, and we're at that $9,000 number. So that changed my bargaining position a little bit with the group when I was meeting with them. But what we talked about when we then got together later with the representatives of all the special districts was, how do we kind of make this fair? What might make sense? And what we sort of agreed to that we would bring back to the boards, and I would recommend to this board, and the other people would recommend to their boards, again subject to board approval, would be that the two seats on the board, the 1 seat would rotate among TUD, Groveland Community Service District, and Twain Harte Service District. It's a 4-year seat, and TUD would get the first seat. So we would get the first 4 years of that allocation. For that, we would pay $8,000 of the overall budget, and the budget for this year is $65,356, which puts the special districts at about $21,785. And so GCSD would be the next, and they would be approximately $4,500 of that, and Twain Hart would be $35. Jamestown Sanitary said they would be $1,000. The rest of the fire districts would be in for about $500, and then the library districts would be in on their prorated share of their budgets. And one of the, I mean, not library, but the cemetery district, and one cemetery district, based upon their overall budget, I think they were $5 or something like that. So it wasn't a big amount for that. So of the two seats then, if TUD, Groveland, and Twain Hart are rotating that, that would continue to rotate as long as somebody from their board, when their turn came up, elected to be on that program. If somebody was a board member and didn't get reelected, then that board would have the ability to reappoint a new board member into that, so you wouldn't automatically vacate that seat if somebody didn't get reelected or chose not to rerun during that time period. However, if nobody stepped up or wanted to fill that spot, then it would automatically rotate to the next group that was up with that. And then the other seat would be up for the 17 members of that. Anybody in those 16 members, because the one seat would already be filled by either TUD, Groveland, or Twain Hart, any of those other 16 entities could step up and say, I want to run for this seat, put their name on the ballot, and then see who gets elected for that. So it wouldn't preclude the other two entities from still having that seat. Some of the people go, well, wait a minute, there's the fire districts and everything else. Well, as you know, Twain Hart and Groveland both have fire districts, and they both have Parks and Rec, so we're the only ones that don't have that, so it was figured that made sense. So in essence, the people that were representing the special districts that were at that meeting agreed to that in concept, and that's what they were going to take back to their individual boards. So what I'm bringing back to you in an overall standpoint is that we would be in for, at least with this year budget. Now, future budgets can go up, so then it would be just on a prorated basis of what that would be going forward. It wouldn't be reverting back. Some members of the group felt strongly that the city, if they get 2 votes, they should really step up for their full third, but I think the county's going to let them keep their 8%, but the county portion would go down prospectively, because we'd be paying 33% of that. Yes?
Yeah, who's paying the 25% that the city's not paying for their full?
The county is.
The county is.
Yeah, so the county's paying the 66% of the city and the county's paying
Less 8%.
Well, no, it's actually more than that. It's less than that, because the 8% is of the 100%, and then the county's paying the balance of that to equal the 66%, and the other special districts are paying their 33 and a third. So that's where it is in a nutshell. That's a little bit more than what we talked about on a board standpoint before, and rotating of that. But I think as I looked at it all, I think that's fair, and that's what I think the group is willing to go along with. So that's what I'm outlining.
Great. Good job.
Yeah, appreciate it.
We have any questions of Ron?
So the money situation is one thing, and just personally, I think that what's been worked out here is, really reasonable and makes sense. I'm more concerned about how the input will be done. Let's say TUD has something that is important that needs to be discussed and handled at LAFCO, but they're not one of the members on the. They're part of the group, but they're not sitting at the table. How does that input get taken care of, or is that?
One of the things that the committee talked about of the special districts is they would comprise 2 of the votes. So the committee was still indicating that they were going to have representatives from the various boards, that they would still meet on a regular basis to provide input, and then that committee would take that input back to the LAFCO committee. In the past, the county has been using internal staff at the county and kind of offsetting that staff that was working on LAFCO. Because of the expanded work and the fact that the county doesn't have a whole lot of extra time with the staff, they've hired an outside consultant to help them with that. So I think with the groups contributing to this, I think part of that is setting up the work plan of the year and what we look at and establishing that, just like we would here as board members and everything else, of what should that yearly work plan be and what do you want to see going forward.
If I may, LAFCO's been around a while, and it's, land use authority. And over the years, LAFCO, your state legislature has been codifying more regulatory powers in LAFCO. It began originally to minimize leapfrog development and lean toward orderly growth. And those powers have grown over the years. And so anything that goes before LAFCO is really about annexations and spheres of influence and municipal service reviews. So Tuolumne Utilities District and the utilities every 5 years are required to do a municipal service review update. It's another one of those unfunded mandates. So you'll see those go before LAFCO. The only other topics would be any of the annexations, sphere of influence increases. For instance, Jamestown Sanitary District would like to increase its SOI. Those all go before LAFCO. And LAFCO, being a statewide organization with 58 counties, they do have a conference and training. So I'd recommend, if any one of your board members are going to sit on the LAFCO commission, that you probably should go to the LAFCO training, because land use regulation is highly technical, lot of regulations, and I think it'd be good experience for one or all of you to sit through that LAFCO training.
Great.
And I guess my other takeaway as the general manager is that when I read the notes in the letter from Mr. Dave Andrus requesting this be entertained by LAFCO, it was always going to be that it would be discussed and talked about and brought back to this board for a decision whether or not your board wanted to move forward with it. And it was, I think, a surprise to Director Ron Kopp and myself that when LAFCO approved acceptance of these additional seats, that essentially codified into existence the special districts in the LAFCO to such an extent that we can't back out now.
Yeah,
And,
be careful what you wish for,
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah. I remember that a little bit differently. I thought we were real in favor of it. And wasn't just an inquire whether we should be in there or not. It was, how do we get in there and how do we help resurrect this thing so that it can help us plan smartly with our limited resources and really enhance our ability to respond as we consolidate. That's what I remember could be.
Well, the interest was certainly there, but the technical details, the financial details weren't there. And I think that there was going to be another decision by this board once that information was developed. But by that time, it had already been codified at LAFCO.
Yeah, and I remember it the same way, Barbara, subject to, coming back and seeing how all the finances and everything else finally shook out. And it was sort of codified before it finally shook out, but that's where we are. The catch-22 of it is we could say, no, we don't want to do it, and then if everybody votes for it, then we go back and we could have less representation for more money. And so I didn't really think that made sense. So it was kind of like, okay, where do we back into this, that it sort of becomes a win-win situation. It's fair and equitable. And so I think the direction I'm looking for is, if everybody's okay with at least moving forward with that, then when we get the summary and the other groups have voted, then it'll be more of a formal agreement that will come back for approval.
Just a point of clarification, I assume that Groveland and Twain Hunter are in the same boat that we are, that they can't back out either?
Nobody can back out.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because that was one of the questions, that it's, well, what if one of the fire districts doesn't want to pay their $500. Well, what happens then is the other group votes on it, and it actually comes out of your tax allocation, out of the parcel tax revenues that you get. So the county can
For the entity that
county
backs
can
out?
actually take the money out of what you get from a parcel tax standpoint. You just don't get that allocation. So it's not like, oh, gee, they haven't paid us for a couple of years or whatever. It's just you don't get that allocation, and the county allocates it to the LAFCO group.
Cool.
Interesting.
Great report.
Other than that, I don't know anything about it.
You did a great job, huh?
So do we need to give him consensus on this or nothing?
Just information?
Well, I think for clarity, it'd be good to give Director Koff direction whether or not you support the proposal as written, because I think that is going to go back to the group.
Yeah, we'll
and
have
then they're
another
going to
committee
codify
meeting.
the agreement, and that will come back.
For a
So it'd
vote.
be good if your board just by motion concurs or.
Anybody care to make a
does not.
motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll
What's the
second.
motion?
The motion is to accept this basic plan, and hopefully we can move forward on this thing.
Great.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded that we accept this plan as presented by Director Koff.
I have a question before
Yes.
we vote.
Oh,
Just, is this legal? Because we didn't advertise in our board packet that we were going to vote on this.
It's direction. We're just,
Okay, I'm just
direction
making
is.
sure.
Yeah, it's not a resolution, it's, and the motion's informal.
Okay.
It's direction that you're all in concurrence with what's outlined by Director Cobb.
Okay,
Cool.
all right.
Okay? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Again, unanimous.
That's great.
Thank you, Ron. Consideration of approval of the fiscal year 2019-2020 operating capital improvement budget, and by incorporation, the strategic plan, capital improvement plan, and salary schedule for employees.
So while our illustrious finance director is getting himself composed, this is the one time each year that your board has the policy requirement or opportunity to dictate policy through establishing priorities. And that's through your budget. This is your biggest policy document of the year. We have embarked on this journey now over a half a year ago by talking about the strategic plan. We held a series of workshops. We did the same through your capital improvement plan, and that established some of the priorities consistent with your 5-year rate plan in 2015. And so we've been climbing this ladder toward your adopted budget, and we've held a workshop for the proposed budget, and so we've really climbed this ladder. Your board's received a lot of information. You've had a lot of opportunity to talk through some of the details. So what's before you today is the culmination of all that work. And we have a brief summary to remind your board of the essential kind of bullet points of what's going into the budget. And then you have another opportunity to discuss and ask any questions you may have. But our staff's hope that we've done a thorough job. You're happy with the information that's been presented. It's been transparent. It looks like a fairly good budget. I think it's going to do everything that we set out forth as priorities. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve to walk through just a kind of a high-level summary of what we're proposing, and we'll open it up for discussion.
Good. Good afternoon, board members. Steve Sheffield, your finance director. As Ed mentioned, we met on May 23rd, had our workshop to go through the budget. At that time, it was really designed to be a working budget to get your input. I think we had a lot of discussion. We had a lot presented there. I really came packed with details in case we needed it. I know we spoke at length that day and came back with very few changes. I mean, there were a couple changes I think went into CIP. But for the most part, we were prepared for that budget, and it seemed like there was acceptance with the board on that as well. So in preparing for today, first and foremost, in your board packet was the 30-plus page operating budget. consistent with the format we've done the last couple budgets here. It's really designed to have anybody that goes to our website and sees the budget, there's going to have an introduction, an overview, a message from our general manager, really detailed schedules on our revenues, our labor, by department expenses, and all that information. So you have that in your packet, similar format. And, Ed and I talked after our workshop. Normally our presentation today would be to go through page by page of that, and we just didn't see that to be appropriate or necessary. We can, if you have any questions on that when we finish, but really what Ed wanted today was just a summary, and it ended up being 4 slides, and he also asked me to reprint it, and you have that before you on each of that. So we're just going to take the opportunity to go through those very quickly. Feel free to stop me anytime. We can drill down as need be, or just if what we have is fine, we can go from there. First and foremost, the fiscal year 20 budget priorities, and I like to headline it with, it's consistent with our 2015 adopted rate study. That's really the framework that we've been operating under for 4 years now. We have 1 more year to go, so all of this is with that in mind. And, the real priorities is first and foremost operations and maintenance. What does that mean for us? It means our labor. It means our pipes, it means our insurance, our fuel, our electricity. How do we keep the water going every single day? How do we keep taking care of the sewer? That's first and foremost the highest priority of this district as well as this budget. Next, in that rate study, CIP was critically important, and we had a workshop on CIP. We provided you details on that. So again, that's one of what we consider the 4 priorities that we're presenting. In addition to that, the rate study talked about we need reserves. We need to establish contingency reserves, operating reserves, and eventually capital reserves. So we're working on that, and this budget continues that effort that we've made. And finally, we thought it was important that, we're addressing our OPEB unfunded liability. This board adopted the policy. We're funding so much each year and increasing that. So this budget includes that pre-funding of OPEB as well. We thought it was important to mention the board's goals and objectives. In early spring of this year, the board and the staff formed the 2019 strategic plan, including the mission, vision, core values, and strategic goals that will guide the district into the future. This budget has been developed consistent with the board's goals and objectives as established in that 2019 plan, and that was part of the board packet as well that's encompassed within this particular item. So I know it's hard to read up here. You have a copy of it, but this is the same budget recap that was presented to you in the workshop. Part of the resolutions to spell out some of the numbers, but this is what we talked about before. We have the revenues, we have our operating expenses, including debt service, we have the capital improvement plan built into there, and finally we have the reserves. Just as we discussed in that workshop, on the water side, we do have an amount that's going to need to be financed based on those revenues and expenses. And sewer, we also are anticipating spending some of our sewer capital reserves this year to accomplish those. So except for those minor amounts that got changed, nothing here's changed since that workshop that we had before. One summary slide to do that. And then lastly, we talked about, yes, sir.
I think on that financing, when we were talking about it, it's like it could be financed. There might be some grants that could come in that to do that, or depending on what the timing of some of those projects are, some of those things may change around a little bit. So it wasn't a guaranteed deal, but we were working with that as sort of an upside, and then we'll see how things play out over the year with that budget amount.
And I think that's an important point, Ron. You're right. We say plan financing, but the reality of it is the leftover amount, what we need to get to some point. And I think, Ed's mentioned it before, we've seen how some of these projects, something else might come up. We had Jamestown come up, or Stent, or whatever else. So we may or may not get through all of that capital. We may have a grant come in that we didn't expect. So it's not necessarily that I'm saying, hey, I'm going to look for a loan tomorrow for $3.7 million. It's a matter of this budget as presented. We need $3.7 million. The reality of it is it's most likely come from a combination of things. Unexpected delays, additional, grant funding, partnerships, unanticipated revenues. You've seen it before. So I think that's an important point to make. It's not just a matter of by adopting this, we're not approving borrowing $3.7 million. Any borrowing would come back to this board before we did any. This outline here is just saying if everything gets done like we had here, that's what we're going to be short. I think that's an important point. Okay. The last slide I have for you that's in your handout as well, between the time we met and we came back, Ed came to me and he said some of the board members were asking about long-term debt, and I think that did get brought up in the workshop. So Ed requested to provide you with a summary of our debt. Now, this is as of our audit, June 30th, 2018. Our budgeted retirements for 19 and our budgeted retirements for 20. Obviously, it doesn't show us going out and getting additional loans, but this is where we stand right now, and I added a column for when it's expected to expire. So we started with approximately $4 million. We're paying down about $500,000 a year. At the end of 2020, we'd have $3 million left, which, since I've been here, we haven't really added to this except for the state SRF funds in 11 and 12, and then Wells Fargo last year. So to me, this is a pretty good situation. But again, obviously, we have kind of a deficit spending projection, and we have some other things going on with our rates and other ones else. But again, informational was requested. Yes, Barbara?
Is the Betty West property on this slide?
Yes. Have to double check which one. I'm pretty sure that's the 2007 LaSalle, which will be paid off in 2022. Most of these prior ones were for a specific project. The Clean Water Assessment District was from 1983 through the county, and the county just handed it over to us like they did a lot of other stuff. The COP is the Columbia Water Treatment Plant on there. That's historically been a big one that was done, again, technically before TUD came into existence. So those first two are that. Then these are the ones, we've kind of gone out and got, and for a variety of projects, land purchase, water distribution systems, Monte Grande treatment plant, I think, was in there.
Is the Wells Fargo that truck?
The Wells Fargo is the HydroVacCon, and for those of you who weren't here, basically the total purchase price was paid cash by sewer, and water, we borrowed them out on that. So
they bought it for
that's really everything we have at this point. Like I said, we went in depth during that. I'm happy to answer any other questions. And you can see in here, which we've provided this year resolutions for each of these. So you have a board resolution specifically for the operating budget, which I am in full agreement with Ed and his recommendations as an auditor. I was used to seeing that way. Different agencies do it differently. But I think the resolution really spells out to the public, to the board, to everybody else, here's what we're doing for the operating budget. Here's what we're doing for the CIP. Here's what we're doing for the strategic plan. We had individual workshops on all of those, so I think it's very appropriate to bring it to the board in kind of this lump mass, but we can certainly talk about any of the individual items if need be.
So just to emphasize, what you have in the staff report are the adopting resolutions for each of those steps that climb this ladder for the strategic plan, the CIP, and your budget. I've done it both ways where we've done them as separate agenda items at separate times. We've done them at the time of budget via separate agenda items, and I've also seen it, and it seems to be the cleanest, where it's under the same agenda item as its own individual resolution. So what staff is asking is for your board to consider and adopt the strategic plan update for your next fiscal year, the CIP, and then you're operating a budget, and along with the equity adjustments and so on. And so with that, we're going to turn this over to your board for questions.
Ron?
So, what a difference from 2012. And I know that TUD is not in Clover by any stretch of the imagination, but what a difference from 2012. So I just want to thank you, Steve, and staff, and also my fellow board members for moving us in this basically positive direction. And so anyway, that's all I got to say.
There's another two behind.
You know, and I'll just add to that for the board's benefit in that this is a huge undertaking. Everybody had a hand in this, from the board to our new general manager to the superintendents, each of the departments all the way down the road. And, you know, we really went into this thing. I told you in the workshop, we go in this thing looking at line by line. And, you know, we're making our best estimate. Even after we met last time, Dawn and I got together again, we probably spent another 3 hours going through each line. You know, we really can't do anything about electricity. Can we do something about small tools? Do we expect chemical costs to change? What are we going to do? So we scrubbed several $100,000 after our initial go-through and stuff. And, you know, the engineering and the ops and everybody else did the same thing with CIP. You know, really, what are we on the hook for? What has been already scheduled and bid, just like today? And so, I told you during the workshop, you know, my direct feelings about, but I really feel this is something that a lot of time and effort went into it. I think it's realistic, and I think it's achievable. Ron?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Ron said. You know, I know, you know, we spent a lot of time just in the workshops, but I know you guys spent a ton more time preparing all the information for the workshops. And, you know, I appreciate all the effort and the level that went into it, because it made the workshops much easier for us to go through and understand what we're really looking at and what the ramifications are. And, you know, Barbara made a good point, you know, a while back, that we got to get some of this stuff fixed so we don't keep having to repair it all the time. And at some point you have to look at, you know, where do we borrow some money and what do we do and how do we get ahead of some of these issues. And I'm hoping that we are successful in going after a number of these grants. And, you know, I know Ed has put, you know, the water consolidation of water treatment plant and some of the other huge items, and we're looking at that with the leave behinds and everything else. But I'm excited over the next couple of years. We've got some huge issues, but I feel good about where we're going as well.
Well, thank you for saying so, because, you know, the board's direction and support is extremely important to us. I mean, it just is for what we do, you know, to accomplish that. So thank you. Yes, Barbara.
I don't know a whole lot about qualifying for a bond rating, but if we're going to, you know, really throw some money at the CIP and really, you know, get ahead, do our reserves look good for that kind of, for a bond rating? What we have about $2 million in reserve?
You know, and I'm going to address this. You know, the majority of my public professional life was as the auditor, the outside CPA. And so I've seen agencies go through a lot of those, and there's a lot of different agencies. And, you know, I personally have never had to go out and get a rating and do that sort of thing. I've always been a part of that from that. So Ed and I have had some discussions. I know Ed has some direct experience with that. But kind of echoing what Director Ringen said, you know, when I got here, we had $6 million in the bank and a $3.5 million deficit. And we were taking on loans. Our rates were well below the established norms. We had zero reserves. All those things are not conducive to a good credit rating. I mean, they basically put you in the junk category. As an auditor, what we look at is, you know, have you addressed your rate situation? Have there been any appropriate increases? Have expenses been controlled? What's the established debt requirements right now? What are the reserves? All those factors would come into play in our credit rating. Are we there yet right now? No. I'm going to tell you right now, we've made progress with these operating and these contingency reserves, but ideally we would have, it's like Ed comes in here, ideally we'd have a capital reserve of $100 million. You know, are we going to get there tomorrow? Absolutely not. But we can take steps, and we probably need to get a credit rating in the near future. But we're working towards that, And it's not something I think if we rushed it right now, if we had a big project or doing that, we probably wouldn't get the rating we wanted or needed. So I think we're making steps in the right direction, and we have for a number of years now, but we still have a ways to go.
Well, and the big priorities that your board's outlined are not even contained in the capital improvement plan, such as the regional water treatment plants. I think that's really going to improve the reliability and the quality of life in the county, but they're big numbers. I think we were originally looking at 20 million, now 30 million just for one regional water treatment plant. And I think the simple, practical takeaway for me is there's just not enough money for the ratepayers to be able to pay for that type of capital improvement and asset that's going to make this county do a lot better in the future. So that really gets back to the leave behinds and why we included a line item budget for your board and staff to be able to work together to work with our legislators, both state and federal, to talk about some of these consolidation type grants for disadvantaged communities, for efficiency, for fire resilience. I think we have some really key talking points that are highly marketable. And I think if we can get the state and the feds to move in our direction, which I think there's a good chance, there's no guarantees, but there's a good chance. We've already had some good contacts through President Bob Rucker recently that's making some action. And I think if we build on that and we got meetings set up with our state legislators already, we're not going to wait for problems to fix. We're already setting up meetings to tell our story and develop that relationship. And I think if we can get halfway there, ideally maybe even beyond halfway there in terms of funding the regional water treatment plants, then that's where a bond may come in to be able to fund that gap. And I think working and leveraging our bonding capacity with state and federal grants, then we might be able to be successful at some of these really major infrastructure items. But I think it's going to be a pretty challenging road in the year ahead. But I'm hoping for big things by the end of this fiscal year. And this budget sets this board and your staff to be able to carry out those actions. So I'm hopeful. And I think I've talked to a few board members. They're hopeful. So we'll work hard and see what we can get. It's going to be a process for the bond rating, and it's not an easy process. The bond rating is going to be more work than preparing the budget and audits and all the above. Because
there's a software migration.
There's going to be a lot of financial data. They're going to overturn every stone.
You're going to throw a bond rating on me too?
But the reserves, I think what we did with this budget was fully fund the reserves per GFOA kind of recommendations. So that's going to help. Yeah. And we did the 5-year rate increase. That's going to help. So things are, I think, coming out of the shadow where we're at a point where this may work.
And I just wanted to echo what Ed said. I'm a supporter. I believe in it. We're on track for that. But, as your finance director, we could have a wonderful bond rating, but it comes down to that capacity. You look at your credit cards are all tapped out. Do you go get another credit card when you can't make the payments? And so even if we got a wonderful bond with a wonderful rating, a wonderful thing, you got to be able to repay it.
That's right.
The bond, everybody thinks like the high school, we got all this money and stuff. You got to repay it, and so I'm still concerned about our ability to repay it, and I think outsiders would as well. But we're making headway in the right direction with that. And the other thing Ed just brought up, which I think is really important, we talked about in the workshop, but if we stay the course with this reserves at the end of 2020, we will have accomplished exactly what we laid out in the rate study, that we will have 90 days operating cash and 2% of our total expenses in operating and contingency reserves, which we had nothing when we started. Then once we get to that, it's like I always said, everybody said, well, how come you don't have a reserve policy? I said, because we don't have any reserves. Get me some reserves and we'll have a policy. Well, if we get this, we finish this year without drawing on, we're going to be able to do that. And I'm going to bring back to a reserve policy saying, here's how we're going to get to that capital reserve and do that. So I agree the rating's important. I agree we have to look at bonds and doing that. But for right now, I think it's a little premature, both from a rating standpoint and our ability to repay, if that makes sense.
I don't have anything else.
I wanted to add that, well, first of all, the reason why I have the bond thing going is because a break-even budget, just, we don't get over the stuff breaking down. We never get ahead of the honey-do list. So that's my concern about why I think bond. And yes, you can repay it, but it's sort of like when your car's broken and then, okay, you bite the bullet and you get a new car. At least you can, go to work, and then your payments give you a level of certainty, and then stuff's getting repaired. So
As long as
we're
they
all
don't
on the same
repossess your
page.
car, you're okay.
And back to what Director Koff was saying, Mountain Counties is restructuring so that we're going to be able to, with a modest dues increase, take on a lobbyist also on behalf of all the little guys and everybody. And so there's some leveraging there that we can do that might offset some of the money that we've allocated for a lobbyist, and continue with that lobbying work on behalf. So like grants and other ways to offset our money that we might be able to leverage with Bob Reeve is who we're hiring.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some of us are going to go meet with him, Friday?
Yeah,
Yes,
we could highlight that under your director comments at the end of the meeting.
Okay, cool.
So anyway, good job.
Thank you very much. And like I said, we appreciate your support. And like I said, Ed does have separate resolutions, but the budget packet you have in it, it is encompassed that labor part of it. It is encompassed the CIP part of it. It is encompassed the strategic plan. So with that, thank you.
So is the lobbying money in the strategic plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So, were there any questions on the resolution, or I'm ready to make a motion?
So it'd be you could do a motion adopting the staff recommendation for each of those resolutions, or your board could do it one by one. There's 5 resolutions, so it's up to your board how you want to make your motion.
I'm prepared to do all of them, but if somebody else wants to do them individually, I'm fine with that.
I think there's a suggested motion in the bottom.
Which is all of them?
Yeah.
All right, since there's nobody here to make public comment, I'll make the motion to approve the resolutions identified in the staff report above, adopting updates of the strategic plan, capital improvement plan, CIP, and the FY20 budget.
I'll second that.
Well, and that recommended motion, just for clarity, did include items 4 and 5. So maybe for clarity, Director Kopp, your motion could just say
To the front page.
approving resolution items 1 through 5.
Because that would include the general manager employment agreement amendment.
And it didn't include, the motion down below didn't include item 4 either. So just for clarity.
Okay, I'll add that to my motion, if you want to second that then as well, Ron.
I certainly will.
Okay. Okay, you can call for the vote.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Again, unanimous.
Okay, staff reports.
Okay, staff reports.
Just real quickly, the board, we just discussed the potential for requiring grants to offset some of the budget expenses. And all I want to let you know is that we had a conference call with our state representative from the Safe Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and we have an active application for about $3 million for the Cuesta Heights project. We're moving forward with construction, but we've set it up so we can get reimbursed. And he has told us that the state will be finally ready to start processing funding agreements. They've been having a backlog due to their migration of their software. And he said that this project is on his supervisor's desk for some funding. And so we're very hopeful. He said, though, it may be toward the end of this calendar year before we actually see a funding agreement. So I don't want to get false hopes here, but the light is getting a little brighter. We also have an application for CDBG funding for the same project, and that we hope to find out in July, around there, if that's going to be funded. So we're kind of playing both paths here. Hopefully one of them will turn out to be, lucrative enough for us to backfeed about $800,000 to $900,000 immediately, because we've already done that work. We can submit right away, and then moving forward, we'll get the rest of the project funded.
What does it mean when they say their software is migrating? Does that mean it went south for the winter or what?
Apparently, I think it did. I think it went south and stayed there for 2 years.
Okay.
It's a similar story to the Department of Motor Vehicles. They've had some major software glitches. They haven't been able to keep up with all the paperwork processes. So.
And then they add that real ID on top of it, when they're in the middle of not having all their software up to speed. Yeah, I understand. All right, well, that would be great if we could get that pulled together.
And we're going to work even more on it. A couple of things, items I'm looking at in terms of workshops. Your board seems to appreciate the informal nature of a workshop. And so we're thinking about a couple coming up, depending on summer schedules for your board. And when Melissa's back from vacation, we'll work on scheduling some dates. But I know the board president and I have been talking about a workshop, talking about, okay, what are our legislative and lobbying and grant priorities? And we'd like to bring in a few speakers to talk about how they could partner with TUD to assist us in that area, everything from lobbying, legislative advocacy, and grant writing. I know we have pretty strong grant writing in-house, but there's some different perspectives that your individual board members have mentioned. So we're going to talk to those folks and bring them in. And it's nothing more than presentations and an informal opportunity to really discuss and then try to develop clarity on our priorities. We have it through your adopted budget now, but staff would like to crystallize really what types of grant applications and what are we going to pursue and how are we going to go talk to our legislators about funding X, Y, or Z. I mean, staff has its own thoughts, but we want to hold a workshop to really just make sure it's ultra clear for everybody so that we're not talking across one another. Because when we do go in to meet with our legislators, we want to have a crystal clear communication. We want to develop those relationships, and we want to have an expected outcome so there's no confusion for our legislators, and that starts with us. So that we're going to have that workshop hopefully by July.
Great.
Into July.
Good.
We also, your board met with Dr. Charles Burt from Cal Poly Irrigation Training Research Center. We do have draft findings and recommendations from the study on looking at all the objectives we have for the ditch. And so what we hope to do is we saved enough in that budget to be able to bring Dr. Burt out again and hold another workshop for him to present and discuss those recommendations and findings. So we hope to do that again by the end of July as well. So a couple of workshops to think about that'll be coming your way.
Good.
I do want to highlight the water tour we had last Thursday. Your board came up with the idea and built on it. And I think moving into that, as months, I think we started talking about it about the beginning of the strategic plan process, so about a half a year ago. And as the months ticked by and that tour got closer and closer, there was a sense of foreboding that, oh, what did we get ourselves into? This is going to be a big task. There's a lot of people. How are we going to make sure we pull this off? So I think that for staff, they did a lot of work to make that a successful event. And, now on the downstream end of that event, it turned out spectacular. I don't know if we could have done a better job. And it really, Lisa Westbrook really reached out, communicated well. And then there was a lot of other staff members that spent time kind of making sure that all the stops were appropriate, that it was timed and sequenced right, that all the support infrastructure was there, and that the messaging was right. And I think the balance of speakers and each of the sites, I think, conveyed a good message among the State Water Board, Department of Water Resources, our grant funding opportunities, our partnering agencies, Association of California Water Agencies. A lot of people were there, and I shook hands with everyone during the course of the day, and especially at the end, and it was unanimous and 100% on the way out the door that it was a spectacular event. And I think even the city councilwoman from Sonora said it was the best day of her life. I'm not sure about that, but it turned out really well, and we had follow-up emails. So if nothing else, I think we really built a story and a positive relationship with a lot of different organizations. I can't guarantee anything, but my expectation is that it's going to pay tenfold dividends. It was, several thousand to be able to host that event, plus all the time that went into it. But I think we're going to see a lot of benefit from it. And I think it's a testimony to teamwork, reaching out to folks, and telling a pretty clear story. And there's always room for improvement, but I think it's something that your board might want to consider in the future, doing on a periodic basis. I think the time it was done before was 5 to 7 years since the last time something like that had been done. So that's probably too long. Every year might be too much. So something to think about, frequency and messaging. So I'm pretty excited how that turned out. So really good there. And then lastly, Pinecrest Lake elevation is a huge topic. We've talked about it. We talked about it at the water tour. We even had State Water Board staff there. I don't think they were more on the grant funding side, but they were there. We had reporters there. I had Guy from the Union Democrat purposely sitting next to me and following some of the key staff around during that day. And he told me during the course of the day, I think he got enough notes to write 20 stories. And, it's good to have press because we got to nurture that relationship. I see them as a partner. And I think with Lisa, we're doing press releases and putting information out that we're telling the TUD story. And I think we're going to focus on all the positives because I think there are so many positives our community and ratepayers don't know about it. And I think that information's starting to come out a little more frequently. And I've been working with Lisa to really amplify that volume. I really like that we're putting our signs on all construction projects now. I think that's another positive testimony, and we're going to be doing press releases on those, ribbon cutting ceremonies, all of the good PR, the great work that your board is doing, and supporting staff and doing. And so I think when it comes to Pinecrest Lake level, BJ and the Union Democrat have now publicized it. It came out of a discussion that Bob, your board president, Bob Rucker, and I were having about Pinecrest one day. And through some of Director or President Rucker's contacts, we were able to speak to some pretty high-level people. And from those discussions came this concept of a letter. And it's an important time-sensitive letter because we expect State Water Board to be publishing via their website their determination that they were unwilling to share with us during our past meeting. And we were very concerned that from some of our the information reading between the lines that we weren't going to be very happy with that determination. And so it was time sensitive that we needed to get some information out there. And so what you saw sent to Joaquin Esquivel, the new chairman of the State Water Board, and CC'd just about everyone we could think of that has involvement in this decision and oversight. That letter was sent a week ago. Literally less than 24 hours upon receipt, we were already getting a response from the State Water Board asking for a meeting with us. And so we're going to follow through. We're going to meet with Mr. Joaquin Esquivel in the near future, and we'll keep your board apprised of what comes out of that meeting. And again, there's no guarantees, but I will tell you that letter did get an immediate reaction. And I think it was a team effort. I spent a weekend writing the letter, really thinking about what's our message and what's important that we talk about with regard to Pinecrest, because the water supply is important, and so too is recreation. And I don't think there's sides here. What we're trying to do is educate people so that we're not talking past one another on difficult issues that can be sensationalized and are highly emotionally charged. So what we're trying to do is quell that rhetoric, and let's work together, sit down around the table and talk about substantive facts and why this is important and how we're going to work together. And I think that letter came together in a way that carefully threaded the needle. If you took time to read it, I've read it a couple of times. I'm real happy with the way it came out. And again, it was a team effort. And I think it's timing-wise important, but substantively very important. And I think we're getting a positive response from it. So we'll keep your board apprised of what comes out in the next few weeks.
Good.
Great. Thank you. Do we have any comments, questions? Ed? Okay. Barbara?
Barbara has stuff report.
Let's see, on
directors.
May 30th, I met with General Manager Ed, just monthly discussion. And let me see what else. Water tour, talked about that. And then yesterday I met with Scott Ratterman. We met over at Murphy's at the Historic Hotel, because we're beginning, since TUD and CCWD are hosting the Mountain Counties board meeting and mixer the night before, for November 14th, 15th, we began to do our planning. And so that's what we did. So that's all I have to report.
Where will that meeting be?
November 14th, 15th. So we'll have our mixer Thursday evening, and we're inviting many people, many water people, NCPA, because, part of this is encouraging folks to get to know who Mountain County is, membership recruitment.
Okay.
And
you have an invitation from John Kingsbury on your iPad.
Yeah, and it's great. It's in our neck of the woods. We did this up at Yuba, and a lot of purveyors and a lot of water and sewer folks, small purveyors came, and we had a mixer. We're working on sponsors for that, and of course it'll be in Murphy's at the Historic Hotel, which has nice cachet.
In November?
And then we'll have a board meeting the following morning. Yes, November 14th, 15th.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a tour of some infrastructure or anything?
Yes, on a CCWD, which you know well, Hunter, and we'll do McKay's.
Okay.
And because an atmospheric river hit upstream of McKay's and displaced about 94,000 cubic yards of material, displacing the capacity in 1997. And so there's a story on Highway 4 that's pretty interesting. And these are half a day.
That slope's it's still slipping too above it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Historically, there's wakes, debris wakes where it cut loose, and because it's a fixotropic slip plane underneath, way up above.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of folks went, well, it's because SBI log. No, it was determined by geologists that that when it turns into goo and it begins to move like a ball bearing. So it kind of oozed over Highway 4 and then on down. And it's been doing it since time immemorial. Awesome. So that'll be in November.
Okay, on the calendar.
I also met with Ed Patterson this week. I went on the tour, and I'd like to echo that I thought the tour was very informative. The staff, I think, did a great job in putting that all together, and I think the people that were invited and showed up and participated in it really got a lot out of it, and so I echo that. And I also want to thank Director Rucker for setting up some of the contacts he did with that water board letter, and I think it will pay some dividends, so thank you for doing that. And I think Ed and staff did a great job refining that letter. It was It was very clear and concise. I think it set the right tone, but it also was very professional, and it just outlined the program, and I don't know how anybody reading it could not think that, we have a real need to set that up for everybody's benefit, and there's no reason from the studies that have been done that it shouldn't be set up that way. So we'll see how that unfolds. I also, went on the tour and then attended the LAFCO committee meeting for my report. So that's all I have to report.
Ron? Jeff?
Yeah, June 5th, I met with GM Pattison for our monthly meeting, and then also went on the tour as well. And the tour was fantastic. You all did a great job, Ed and Eric and Dawn and Lisa setting it up. I mean, it was very professional, and I appreciate the time and effort. I'm sure there was other people here as well that put a lot of time and effort into it, and it showed. So good job. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Ron?
Okay. Yeah, I think my takeaway from the tour, because I spoke to pretty much everybody there. I missed a few, shook hands with a bunch of people and spoke with them. One of the questions I would ask them is, what do you think about this tour? What are you taking home on it? And the thing that I think impressed me about the tour, well, a lot of things did, but my takeaway was that staff was able to tell a whole bunch of different stories about what our issues are and all that, but it came across in a way with how TUD is dealing with them, and it was more like we got a pretty heavy load, but we're carrying the load, and so I thought that was really good. So, and there was a lot of interesting comments slid in there too that was just added a little zip to the discussions and so on. So I thought that was really good. Then on May 31st, had an afternoon meeting up in Placerville with John Kingsbury, Dave Brenninger from Mountain Counties, and Bob Reeb, the new lobbyist. And what our meeting was about is I'm trying, and John Kingsbury is trying to, as well as the vice chair of the legislative committee, Rick Lind, to change the legislative committee over from being reactive to being proactive, and trying to stay better on top of the legislation that's coming at us all the time, so that Mountain County's board and John Kingsbury can make the right decisions early in advance, as well as maybe we can finally start advocating. So this is really a positive thing. And I'm really excited to be able to be working with Bob Reeb on this. I expect that he will have some suggestions for me on how to morph this committee into where we want to get it. So we'll see how it all goes. And then, as long as we're talking about letters, I hope all of you saw the letter that John Kingsbury authored, along with some folks from Southern California, across California. This is really exciting times, because what he has done, he and his board have started a dialogue, a good dialogue, between the Mountain Counties people, Northern California, and Southern California. And he's getting them involved, and they are involved in a positive way. So if you get a chance, read the letter. It even includes the DSAL group. So pretty exciting stuff. So that's it for me.
The DSAL group was one of the authors of it, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they co-authored it, yeah.
What? Was this a while back or recent?
It's
Just came in.
right on the iPad right now.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen
It
it.
just came in the last day or two, I think.
Okay. If I may ask a question on the legislative committee, you know, Tuolumne Utilities District belongs to Association of California Water Agencies, and, you know, we all attended that, and they have a real strong body of committees. I mean, that's what makes up Aqua, you know, from local government and then on up through statewide, and that's why partly they're so successful. And one of the committees, the legislative committee, is probably the kind of most popular and important committee among all of there. Not to say some committees more important than others, but that one garners a lot of interest. And so TUD's attending those ledge committees. I want to just make sure, how are we going to interface the Mountain County's ledge committee with the Aqua to make sure there's some consistency in education and cross-pollination? And I guess I don't really have a comment other than I think it'd be important that we bridge those two.
I'm already working on that. Lisa and I have talked, and she brings back a report, and I'm planning on taking the things that are important to the Mountain Counties area and, you know, trying to pass that along and so on. And if I can go to those meetings, I'm going to go to them personally. Maybe she and I can go down together or something like that. But there's only so many hours in the day, and I am spread thin. Yes.
Yeah, Dave Egerton and John Kingsbury have been meeting now periodically to close that they're very aware of that and merge, because Aqua is really encumbered with north, south, east, west.
Right.
And so we're really complementary, and so they have been
Okay.
talking on that too. We
Good.
can fill you in.
So that's all I got.
Okay, thanks. Well, I've been spending my time on legislative issues, working with Ed, and I'm really excited to see that we have a general manager that realizes the importance of being seen and heard in Sacramento and DC a lot. Those are the people that are agencies that get the best treatment. I mean, if you're not heard all the time, and they you know, when something comes up and they think, well, who would that fit in good with? Well, if TUD is always the one that's always up there and getting around and being known, and we're the ones that are going to get a lot of the special treatment. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to be meeting with the Farm Bureau in Modesto, Tommy Orvis, about stock water ponds that we've all talked about, and been talking with Sheriff Brennan. We were going to have a meeting up here next week with a lady that lives up here that works for the Farm Bureau of Modesto, but she's water resources. She doesn't have anything to do with actually ponds. But come to find out, the Farm Bureau has tried to run legislation on stock water ponds twice, and they've been turned down both times in Sacramento. And so I'm going to have a meeting with Tom tomorrow and get up to speed on this, and I'll brief the board on it when I get back. And Sherry is very, very interested. She's had a stock water pond that she ended up just poking a hole in the bottom of it and draining it because of all the regulations. And the Farm Bureau, we've met with the Farm Bureau up here, some of the representatives, and Jeff and I had breakfast the other morning with Sean, and they're pretty frustrated with what's going on with these stock water ponds, and it's so expensive right now and so highly regulated to have a stock water pond, if you can believe it, that they're not even interested in doing it. So, and it fits right into what we're trying to accomplish with storage and, you know, water for fire and various other things. So, anyway, I'm gonna continue on that. And I'll keep the board updated, and I know Ron wants to be involved in it. Who anybody else wants to be involved, let me know.
I know of a turtle source.
Turtle source?
Ponds, sure.
Are those grazing turtles?
Are those the pet turtles or the real ones?
Oh, they'll be the real ones. You want to see them with those ponds.
Yeah.
You know, salt them with something endangered.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much my report. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Meeting adjourned.